My new boss fired me the moment he took over the company. He didn't know he would lose everything. The first thing my new boss ever said to me wasn't hello. It was, "You're not needed anymore." He called me into the glass conference room while the entire floor could see us. Didn't shut the blinds. Didn't lower his voice. He skimmed my file for maybe 10 seconds before sliding a paper across the table. "You don't fit the vision of where I'm taking this company," he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I felt every eye outside that room watching me stand there. Stunned, humiliated, blindsided. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the document. 6 years of my life reduced to a single paragraph. 6 years of late nights, emergency fixes, and putting out fires nobody else could handle. And then he added the line that changed everything. He leaned forward, fingers drumming on the polished wood, and smiled like he'd already won. He tapped the document with his expensive pen. "If you sign today, I'll approve the smaller severance. If not, legal will drag this out." Smaller severance. After 6 years of dedicated service. After building the systems that kept this company running smoothly. HR sat beside him, hands folded, eyes glued to the table. Not one word in my defense. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip that table and walk out with my dignity intact. Instead, I asked one question, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. "Is this decision final?" He smiled wider, clearly enjoying this moment of power. "Absolutely." The word hung in the air like poison. I stood up slowly, leaving the unsigned paper on the table. I walked out without signing, and I could feel something breaking behind me. Not just my career. Something bigger. As I reached the door, he stopped me. "Oh, and Elena." I turned, hand on the glass door handle. "You were middle management. Easily replaceable. This company needs real leaders now." That word, replaceable, hit harder than the firing itself. It echoed in my head as I stood there, frozen. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to explain that without me, his perfect company would crumble. But pride and shock kept my mouth shut. I nodded once, held my breath, and walked straight past my team. Some looked shocked, eyes wide with disbelief. Some looked afraid, probably wondering if they were next. No one followed me. No one said a word. The silence was deafening as I made my way to my desk, packed my things into a cardboard box, and headed for the exit. My badge didn't work at the door anymore. They'd already deactivated it. I didn't cry in the office. I didn't cry in the elevator, even though it felt like my chest was caving in. I cried in my car with the engine off, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. 6 years. Late nights when everyone else went home. Missed holidays because the system crashed. Crisis calls at 2 a.m. when nobody else could fix the problem. Erased in 7 minutes. I watched other employees walk to their cars, laughing and chatting like it was a normal Tuesday. For them it was. For me, everything had just shattered. What he didn't know, what no one had bothered to explain to him during the transition, was that the company he just took over only worked because of systems I built from scratch. And those systems were about to start failing. Without me there to maintain them, to troubleshoot the quirks only I understood, everything would slowly unravel. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud or political. I didn't play office games or schmooze with executives at corporate events. I was the one people came to when things broke. When the quarterly reports didn't match. When the inventory system glitched. When new software needed integration. I designed the operational pipeline that connected every department. I built the internal reporting logic that executives relied on for board meetings. I trained department heads who now outranked me, teaching them processes I created. Every time a promotion came up, I was told the same thing. "You're too essential where you are. We can't afford to move you. Maybe next quarter." I believed loyalty would protect me. I believed being indispensable meant job security. That belief died in that parking lot, along with my trust in corporate promises. I should have known better. In business, being essential just makes you a tool, not a person. 3 days later, I heard they hired my replacement. A consultant with a fancy degree and an even fancier salary. Expensive, confident, loud. Everything I wasn't. My former colleague texted me the news with a worried emoji. By the end of his first week, the weekly performance dashboard stopped syncing properly. Numbers appeared in wrong columns. Dates shifted randomly. By the end of the second week, inventory reports conflicted with finance data. Department heads started arguing in meetings, each insisting their numbers were correct. By the third week, leadership started asking questions no one could answer. Why is this broken? Who changed the settings? Where's the backup data? I watched quietly from the outside, reading updates through a friend who still worked there. I didn't celebrate their struggles. I didn't feel vindicated yet. I just felt empty. And a little bit curious about how long it would take them to realize their mistake. My phone rang at 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday. It was Maya, one of my old team leads, someone I'd mentored for 3 years. Elena. I don't know who else to call, she whispered, voice shaking. Things are bad. Really bad. The new guy doesn't understand the system. Reports are failing. The CEO is threatening people. Can you? I stared at the ceiling of my bedroom, phone pressed to my ear. Part of me wanted to help. Part of me wanted to fix everything like I always did. But a bigger part of me, the part that had been humiliated in that glass room, stayed silent. I'm sorry, Maya. I can't. I wasn't bitter exactly. I was done rescuing people who didn't protect me when I needed them. People who watched me get fired and said nothing. I wished her luck and ended the call. The phone felt heavy in my hand afterward. Legal emailed me the next morning, Friday at 9:15 a.m. Subject line. Reminder of contractual obligations. Reminder of my NDA. A warning not to interfere with internal operations or disparage the company publicly. The tone was threatening, legal language designed to scare me into silence. I read it 3 times, then laughed out loud in my empty apartment. The irony was beautiful. They were worried I'd sabotage them. They thought I might leak information or badmouth them online. They had no idea the truth was simpler and more devastating. I didn't need to interfere. I didn't need to say a single negative word. All I had to do was stay silent. Let them struggle with the systems they didn't understand. Let them drown in the complexity I'd simplified for years. My absence was the loudest statement I could make. I deleted the email without responding. They'd hear from me when it mattered. I spent that weekend thinking about something most people had forgotten. Years earlier, when the company couldn't afford bonuses during a rough quarter, the former CFO offered alternatives to senior staff. Cash now or deferred compensation later. Some people took stock options. Some took promises of future raises. Chose shares. Not many, just a small percentage. But enough. It was buried deep in an old agreement, signed 5 years ago when I was younger and more optimistic. No one bothered to read those old contracts during the leadership transition. The new CEO probably didn't even know those agreements existed. I wasn't just an ex-employee with hurt feelings. I was a shareholder. And shareholders have rights. I pulled out the paperwork from my file cabinet, dust covering the folder. The signatures were still valid. The terms were clear. I smiled for the first time since getting fired. This changed everything. I took a short consulting role with a smaller company across town. The work was easy, almost boring compared to what I'd handled before. But it paid well and kept me busy. Every morning though, I checked the numbers from my old company. Public filings. Stock price. Customer reviews online. Customer complaints increased steadily. 1-star reviews mentioned late deliveries and incorrect orders. Delivery timelines slipped week after week. Partners started posting vague statements about reviewing their options. A major client paused renewal talks, citing operational concerns. The company was bleeding. Slowly, visibly, painfully. Revenue dropped 3%, then 5%, then 8%. And through it all, the new CEO kept smiling in public. Press releases talked about exciting new directions and strategic restructuring. Photos showed him at industry conferences, shaking hands and giving speeches. He looked successful. Behind the scenes, I knew the truth was very different. Then he did something that made my blood boil. He appeared on a business podcast, one of those shows where executives talk about their leadership philosophy. I listened while making dinner, stirring pasta and waiting. Then he said it. Sometimes you have to cut dead weight to move forward. We removed people who were comfortable but unexceptional. People who coasted on past success instead of innovating. I knew he meant me. Timeline matched. The description fit. He was rewriting history, making himself look like a bold reformer instead of an impulsive fool. Hearing my 6 years of work dismissed so casually lit something cold and focused inside me. Something patient and calculating. He thought the damage was already done. He thought firing me was the end of the story. He was wrong. This was just the beginning. I saved the podcast episode. Documentation matters. Everything matters when you're building a case. By week 4 after my termination, the cracks were undeniable even to outsiders. Internal teams blamed each other for missing deadlines and broken processes. Sales blamed operations. Operations blamed IT. T blamed management. Executives demanded answers in increasingly angry emails that got leaked to industry blogs. The CEO held emergency meetings where he blamed legacy systems. Systems I built. Systems that worked perfectly for years, until he removed the person who maintained them. The person who understood every quirk and workaround. Online forums where employees anonymously discussed the company filled with complaints. Nothing works anymore. Leadership has no idea what they're doing. We lost 3 major clients this month. I watched the implosion with a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for my former colleagues who were suffering. Anger at the man who caused this. And underneath it all, a growing sense that justice was coming. Slowly. Inevitably. Maya sent me an audio file via encrypted message app. No explanation, just a file labeled Board Meeting Week 5. I hesitated before clicking play. Then I heard his voice, loud and angry, echoing in what must have been the main conference room. This mess existed before I got here. These people sabotaged me. They built deliberately complicated systems to make themselves irreplaceable. Someone tried to interrupt, but he shouted over them. Elena was the worst of them. She hoarded knowledge. She made herself essential on purpose. And now we're paying the price. He'd said my name in a board meeting, blaming me for his failures. My hands shook as I saved the file to 3 different locations. Cloud storage. External hard drive. Email draft. Receipts matter. Evidence matters. When you're planning to fight back, you need proof. And now I had proof of him lying to the board, rewriting history to cover his incompetence. Monday morning I pulled out my shareholder agreement. As a shareholder, even a small one, I had rights. The right to information. The right to question leadership decisions. The right to request financial transparency. I drafted a formal letter, carefully worded by a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. The letter requested access to financial reports, operational metrics, and board meeting minutes. It cited specific clauses in corporate bylaws that protected shareholder rights. I sent it via certified mail and email, creating a paper trail. That request triggered something leadership couldn't stop: an independent audit. Corporate bylaws required it when shareholders formally questioned financial transparency. The panic was immediate. My lawyer friend texted me that afternoon. They're freaking out. Legal department is scrambling. The CEO called an emergency meeting. Smiled. Sometimes the smallest lever moves the biggest weight. Sometimes being underestimated is your greatest advantage. They never saw me coming. The audit revealed inconsistencies that made the board nervous. Projected revenue versus actual revenue showed major gaps. Operational reports had been altered after my termination. Dates changed, numbers adjusted, problems minimized. My archived data, time-stamped and digitally signed, told a very different story. I'd always been meticulous about documentation. Every report I filed was backed up. Every email saved. Every decision logged with dates and reasoning. Now that caution paid off. The auditors compared my historical data with current reports. Nothing matched. Someone had been rewriting reality, trying to make the company's collapse look like a pre-existing problem instead of a post-Elena disaster. The evidence was damning. Charts showed clear decline starting exactly 1 week after my termination. Customer satisfaction scores dropped. Error rates tripled. Response times doubled. You can't argue with timestamp data. Numbers don't lie. People do. And this CEO had been lying to everyone. The CEO tried to control the narrative publicly. He posted on LinkedIn about navigating challenges inherited from previous operational structures. He gave an interview to a trade publication saying I'd left broken systems that required extensive repairs. He was trying to get ahead of the story, to frame himself as the hero fixing someone else's mess. But his story had a fatal flaw. My systems had clean logs. Digital records showing consistent performance for years. Server logs. Database queries. System uptimes. Error reports. Every single piece of evidence showed smooth operations until exactly 1 day after my access was revoked. Then everything started breaking. His narrative collapsed under the weight of evidence. Industry analysts started asking questions. If the systems were broken, why did problems only appear after the restructuring? Journalists who cover corporate leadership began investigating. His story didn't hold up to basic scrutiny. The timeline was too obvious. The correlation too clear. Even his defenders couldn't explain away the facts. I submitted everything calmly and professionally. No angry emails. No social media rants. No emotional outburst. Just facts. Time-stamped emails showing system performance. Reports demonstrating operational excellence. Training documents proving I'd shared knowledge, not hoarded it. Logs showing the exact moment each system began failing after my departure. I organized it all into a clean folder structure with a table of contents. Professional. Thorough. Undeniable. My lawyer delivered it to the board with a simple cover letter requesting clarification of the decision-making process that led to my termination. We didn't accuse anyone. We didn't demand anything. We just asked questions and provided evidence. Sometimes that's more powerful than accusations. The board stopped defending him that same day. Emergency sessions were scheduled. His allies went quiet. Even the VP who'd sat silently during my firing started distancing himself. I heard through Maya that executives were now openly questioning the CEO's judgment. The tide had turned. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I received a formal invitation via email, marked urgent. But this time I wasn't invited as staff. I wasn't there to be fired or disciplined. I was invited as an investor. As a shareholder with documented concerns about company leadership and financial transparency. The email was coldly professional, but I could read the panic between the lines. They couldn't exclude me. Corporate bylaws gave me the right to attend when shareholder grievances were being discussed. I smiled for the first time in weeks. A real smile, not the bitter ones I'd been managing. I went shopping that weekend for a new suit. Navy blue, perfectly tailored. Professional but powerful. Got my hair done. Practiced my calm, neutral expression in the mirror. No anger. No smugness. Just quiet confidence. Tuesday morning, I drove to the office building I'd been escorted out of 5 weeks earlier. This time I walked through the front door like I owned the place. When I walked into the boardroom, his face drained of color. The confident CEO who'd fired me without hesitation looked like he'd seen a ghost. He hadn't known my name would be on the attendance list. Hadn't known I'd be sitting at the same table as him. No smug smile now. No casual dismissal. Just fear. Raw, undeniable fear in his eyes. Board members nodded at me politely. The chairman gestured to an empty seat. I sat down, placed my folder on the table, and waited. The CEO tried to recover, clearing his throat and shuffling papers. But his hands trembled slightly. He started talking about quarterly projections, trying to move the meeting forward. The chairman interrupted him. "We'll address the shareholder concerns first." Silence. The CEO's jaw tightened. He glanced at me, then away. He knew what was coming. For the first time since this started, I felt powerful. Not because I was seeking revenge. 'Cause I was seeking truth. And truth has a weight that lies can't support. The board questioned him directly. "Can you explain the operational decline post-restructuring? Why do the metrics contradict your reports? Did you review the systems before making personnel changes?" He contradicted himself repeatedly. First he said the systems were outdated. Then he said they were too complicated. Then he blamed lack of documentation, until someone pointed out my extensive documentation library. He raised his voice, defensive and angry. "I made tough decisions. Cut costs. I streamlined operations." The chairman remained calm. "You cut the person who built those operations." Silence filled the room, thick, uncomfortable silence. The kind that presses down on you and makes breathing difficult. Board members exchanged glances. One woman shook her head slightly. The CEO tried again, voice desperate now. "She made herself too essential. That's poor planning." But his arguments sounded hollow. Everyone in that room could see the evidence. System performance before Elena. Excellent. System performance after Elena. Disaster. The math was simple. The conclusion was obvious. And silence is louder than shouting. He was asked to step out temporarily, while the board discussed next steps. His face flushed red as he stood, but he couldn't argue. Corporate bylaws gave the board that authority. He walked out, and I heard his footsteps echo down the hallway. The board deliberated for 40 minutes. I sat outside with coffee, checking my phone. Maya texted me. "Everyone's talking about what's happening. His office is being cleared." At 3:47 p.m. I was called back in. The chairman spoke formally. "The board has decided to implement immediate leadership restructuring. Effective today, operational authority is temporarily transferred to the executive committee." His access was cut by end of day. Security escorted him from the building with his personal items in a box. The same box I'd carried. The same walk of shame I'd endured. The company announced leadership restructuring before the week ended. Press release talked about strategic realignment and renewed focus on operational excellence. They didn't mention his name. He simply disappeared from the website, from the directory, from the story. He emailed me personally 3 days later. Subject line: conversation request. I stared at it for a long moment before opening. The message was careful, almost humble. "Elena, I believe I misjudged your role in the company's operations. Recent developments have clarified certain operational dependencies I wasn't aware of during the transition period. The board has asked me to reach out. Would you be willing to return in a consulting capacity to help stabilize current systems? We can discuss terms that reflect your actual value to the organization." I read it twice. Then a third time. He was asking me to come back. To save him. To fix the mess he created when he fired me in front of everyone and called me replaceable. The audacity was almost impressive. Part of me wanted to gloat. Part of me wanted to write a long response detailing every mistake he made. But I didn't. I closed the message and went for a walk. I thought about what I really wanted from this situation. I replied with one sentence. "You told me to start over." I did. No elaboration. No anger. No satisfaction. Just closure. I declined the consulting offer politely in a follow-up line. "I've accepted a position elsewhere that better aligns with my career goals. I wish you success in resolving the current challenges." Professional. Clean. Final. I copied the board chairman on the email so they'd know I wasn't interested in returning. Within a week, they hired back 2 of my former team members and promoted Maya to operations director. The company slowly stabilized under people who actually understood the systems. I heard later that the CEO tried to stay on in a reduced capacity, but the board declined. His contract was terminated by mutual agreement. Corporate speak for, "We're forcing you out." His LinkedIn profile still lists himself as CEO, but the dates stop 5 weeks after he started. A warning sign for anyone who checks references. The shortest CEO tenure in the company's history. A permanent stain on his reputation. The company recovered gradually over the following months. The stock stabilized as operations improved. Customer complaints decreased. Partners renewed their contracts. Maya did an excellent job and I was genuinely happy for her. She deserved the opportunity. His career didn't recover. I tracked it through LinkedIn updates and industry news. He took a 6-month sabbatical, then listed himself as an independent consultant, then stopped updating his profile entirely. He became a case study in executive failure, the cautionary tale people share in business schools. The CEO who destroyed a company in 5 weeks. Articles analyzed his mistakes. Leadership podcasts discussed what went wrong. His name became synonymous with arrogant mismanagement. I never spoke publicly about what happened. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just letting someone face the natural consequences of their own actions. He destroyed himself. I just made sure the truth was documented. That's not revenge. That's accountability. I sold my shares 9 months later, when the stock price had recovered fully. Made a decent profit, enough to fund my next chapter. I started my own consulting firm, specializing in operational systems for mid-size companies. Turns out, there's huge demand for someone who can build reliable systems and actually explain them to others. My calendar filled up within weeks. Former colleagues referred me to their networks. Maya sent me 3 clients in the first month alone. I hired 2 assistants and rented a small office downtown. Built something that was mine, that nobody could take away with a 7-minute meeting. I learned the lesson he never did. Power isn't loud. Competence doesn't brag. Real leadership isn't about firing people to make yourself look decisive. And you should never, ever humiliate someone who quietly holds the foundation together. Because foundations don't disappear when you stop looking at them. They just stop supporting you. And when everything comes crashing down, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. I wasn't replaceable after all. I was essential. The difference is, now I'm essential on my own terms.